Oh, were you there at the time?
Yeah, I was there for.
Hey, yeah, how's it going?
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
I like some glasses.
Hey, convertible.
Oh, you got like silver thorn. That's what.
Keep it short, or I'll. Big day Saturday. Don't make your future brother-in-law mad.
What's Saturday?
Oh yeah.
Hey, quickly,
Do what?
35 minutes tops.
What?
For you, Alan?
I'll just cut you off at that point.
I don't think you're that.
All right. Chad, are you still out there? Yep. All right, it's 5:31. Let's get, oh, hang on. Mr. Byler, are you ready?
I'm trying to see if we are or not.
We gotta get the camera and makeup wardrobe in here first.
We're live.
We're live. Oh, so, okay. Thought we were gonna film this and then record it. Oh boy, nothing like live. All right, call the meeting to order. Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. And I'll entertain approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And do we have any public comments, any questions?
No, sir.
Nope, no questions, all right. None. Dr. Robinson will move forward.
Okay, first we have some informational reports. We're going to start with Parents Teachers Program. Ms. Hobeck?
Good evening. I believe you all were sent this information earlier. I do have, the numbers are up slightly since then because we had some more reporting put in our database tracking system. But Marilyn Schlosser is our parent educator for the district. She's housed over at the alternative building. She had 65 families that received personal home visits this year. She had a total of 83 children that received personal home visits because some of those families have more than one child. There was a total of 290 personal contacts made. I believe yours says 279, so we went up a little bit that. There was 179 children ages birth to 3 screened, and only about 180 ages 4 to 6 this year screened. That is low because we had to cancel our kindergarten screening in April. That has been rescheduled for July 13th through the 16th. So that's going to be quite a bit lower because generally at that screening we screen probably between 250 and 300 kids around there. So, but those numbers will be able to be turned in on next year's funding. So the end of the year report for PAT, I'll be putting that in soon with the help of Dr. Blissett this week. We'll get that in for our funding, our end of the year stuff. Marilyn does a great job, but she's one person. So we could be serving a lot more families. But I know that's something too. We have to look at with our money and our budget and what we need to do with our finances. But she's done a great job for one person. She doesn't even have a secretary or anything to help. My secretary at kindergarten helps her put in some stuff, and I know Carla and Beverly help at all schools some too. But she's done a great job. She's been doing this for many years. We had a good DESE review this year with our PAT person, Emily Sims. Dr. Blissett got to come over and meet her. She had high praises to say for us. She checked files to make sure Marilyn was keeping things recorded correctly, asked questions. I came over, showed her how I invoiced monthly, and we turned in numbers. So we got a good report from that. PAT is a program in the future, if funds ever become available, that we might want to look at to help us with why we are showing a discrepancy in the population we serve, especially in our minority count, and looking at their achievement and their discipline. We talked about that, what some things we can do to increase that is to put money into PAT and preschool. But I know that all comes with funding and everything else that we're trying to accomplish. So, but overall, looks pretty good, and I'm hoping to have a good screening in July. I've got a lot of people already calling, inquiring about that and signing up. I think we're smart to wait till July maybe and kind of let this rest out and see how we do till then with everything. But I don't know ideal on kindergarten class sizes yet because of this. And then our preschool, I know this is kind of going off topic, but it goes with it. Our preschool kiddos, those letters went out today. Those are getting into our preschool for next year. We'll kind of gradually, I've left a few slots open as we have some more that may decline or add on, or we may get some kids that move in with special needs we need to add into that. But we'll have a full house in preschool, and I'll have a waiting list like we always do. So any other questions I can answer for you all?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much.
As an aside to that, do we have any feel for what we think our student population might be? I mean, just due to all of this, I mean, the reason I asked, there was of course, social media post about some of the MSBA suggestions, and some of them seem to be, choose my words wisely since we're on live TV, seem to be silly. That's not a technical term, but seem to be silly and kind of over the top, at least in my opinion. And to me, that would lead folks to, like, man, I'll just keep the kids at home and do it here. Of course, maybe not after they figured out that 30 days of quarantine, they may not want to homeschool, but do we have any feel for that? I mean, have you had anything?
No, I mean, I don't at this point. I'm curious to see. I think once we do kindergarten registration, that'll give us a great indicator. And I think we need to move forward, actually scheduling a meeting for the next week and the following week to really lay those things out for parents in our community, what we'll be doing when we, in our plan to reopen, so that they can make the decision for what they want to do. And Ms. Hobeck and Ms. Slosher, I think they do an awesome job, and they are correct in that we will have to make a commitment at some point here when time allows to increase the service area and range of that program, because it will benefit us. It's not an immediate impact, but it's a long-term impact that helps us out as a district. Up next, Mr. Sheeter, who also in the high school, just coming into the district and working with the high school and the high school staff. These guys do a tremendous job, and you know that I've been in a number of districts, but they do a tremendous job with our seniors and the information that they give.
What I have to present is each year we do a follow-up on our previous year's graduates, so I have information from the class of 2019 between the months of November and February. Basically, I track down all the graduates from high school plus New Horizons. I actually do our sending schools as well, but I don't have that information. I send that to their schools, like Dexter students and Richland and all that. I'll give that back to their schools. But I do have our stuff. I believe that was on the agenda. Does everybody have that, or does anyone want a hard copy? I have some if you'd like one.
Got it.
You
Thank
good?
you.
Okay. Well, if you look at the pie graph there, you can see that we're doing our job, I believe, as educators, because our kids, they either go to a 4-year school, a 2-year school, or they go into the workforce. I mean, they're doing things that are productive. We do have a little bit high number of, students who don't do anything right after graduation, and that is a little bit concerning. But for the most part, our kids are doing good stuff. I mean, you look at the thing that where our kids are going in the past, we've sent kids to each coast. Last year was a little bit different. Whereas I think the furthest we sent anyone was probably Starkville or Northwest Ohio was another place kids went to a technical school there. But we do send a lot of students to CMOS and a lot more to Three Rivers. There's also a comparison graph that I have there from the past 6 years, and it shows each one of those areas, what has went on from those particular years. And you can see our number, if you look at the 4-year school, it's down a little bit since 2014, but all those lines are fairly consistent over a 6-year period. There's some ebbs and some flows in there, but for the most part, our kids are going to school and doing what they need to after they graduate. And that's a testament to our parents mainly, and to our teachers as well.
That's great information.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I know it's hard to track all those people down.
It's easier now than it was in 2015, I can tell you. It's a lot easier now. You learn a little bit of tricks and you figure out how to find kids. I mean, you get better contact information, and it does not take nearly as long as it did previously.
No, good work.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Thanks.
I also have one other task that we were asked to take care of. I'm not sure if you have this information or not. This is the 2020 prospects. Okay, that's on there as well. Yeah, we were asked to check this year's seniors, and through a lot of interviews, mainly by Tanisha Pulley, our college advisor at the high school campus, we weren't able to locate every single kid and see exactly what they wanted to do, but there was maybe 20 of them or so. Last week I went in and started making phone calls, and I was able to locate another 6 or 7 of them. The other ones, those calls weren't answered, so I didn't get information on all of them. But this says what our kids are planning on doing this year's group after graduation. And it's pretty much right on par as the other ones. The 4-year school is a little bit higher from the class of 2020 as it was from 19. But yeah, that's good information. You know, of course, obviously this is not set in stone. Not every single one of these students who said they were going to a 4-year school has already been accepted and, you know, bought their college dorm stuff. And who knows what's, many a slip puts the cup in the lip. You never know what may happen between now and August. So, but this is a good credit to Tanisha. She worked really hard getting this. She spent a lot of time getting all this stuff. So,
Yeah, and the next step to that with Ms. Pulley and Mr. Sheeter and those guys working together is that we address those pieces of those kids who have not followed through. Like, okay, so what was the barrier? Why didn't you go? Or what? But they try to do that on the front end and hit those kids who are what they call tier 3. They've broken down tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. So the high barrier kids are getting more assistance so that we don't have as many not go. This is all that work wrapped together.
she's got all that stuff addressed on a spreadsheet that she came out with, which is where I got most of that information. But yeah, she has all of that addressed, and she's got a plan in place, and we've got all sorts of stuff to do to make contact with all those students.
Doing good stuff.
Thank you.
Good deal. Thanks, Al.
Thanks.
All right, Ms. Boardman, money time.
So we have, we flip-flop again. I don't like it when this happens, but our expenses, on the date we ran this report, I ran it on 5/3. Our expenses were at 29.2 million. Our revenues were at 27.9. I will say that due to COVID, not all of the April revenue was in because there's so many on my staff, I can't bring my staff in at the same time because we can't socially distance properly downstairs. So the lady that posts revenues for me, I know she didn't have everything in the system at that time. We also have worked very hard the last 2 days on federal programs, working with DESE, with them being at their homes and us being staggered. All of us, at least 3 of us need to be in the same room at the same time to get some federal money in. So we've worked very hard on the last 2 days, and we will invoice by Friday. Normally we would have that federal revenue in. I still think we will end the year, and we'll talk a little bit more about budget ending balances when we do budget adjustments, but I still think we're gonna land somewhere between 12.4 and 12.2. So that's not bad. I've got a statement on the budget adjustments that when our general, again, not written, but our general consensus has always been with past boards of education is that we would keep 3 months operating expenses, and that's gonna run anywhere from 8.8 to 9 in a year that you don't have bond expenses in it, so we would still be substantially above, good rainy day reserve above that. So anyway, I like it better when it flip-flops the other way. But we're still on track at the end of the year with where we thought we would. Thank you.
Up next, in light of everything that Ms. Boardman was talking about with COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on our community, I know that I had a number of discussions with the board members, and I know you guys feel the same way that I do and a number of our staff, that we really want to be sensitive to our community and sensitive to their needs. So, we wanted to just review what our next steps are going to be, with the bond issue and the debt, service tax levy, and deferring that until September 2021. So I don't know if, someone wants to make a comment, but, I'm proposing and recommending that we delay it. We'll still have our vote, and we get the, we'll encourage people to vote and look for their approval, but we would defer it until the increase, the debt tax increase, until September 2021.
And I know we talked about this sort of individually. Would that generate any money? So what do we do to get, if we want to start, obviously, they're not gonna hold off getting paid until September 2021. So do we just use our
No.
essentially rainy day fund, or how are we going?
Well, anything, once the bond issue passes, once the voters have spoken and said, yes, we will support this, as soon as we sell bonds, then that payment schedule is gonna come into place for that fiscal year. But this is twofold. Piper, Sandler. All habits die hard after our real hard. We've worked with our financial advisors at Piper Sandler. They gave us a couple of different options, and those were shared by Dr. Robinson in his weekly updates with the board. The consensus was probably the best and safest way to do this for the district would be if we split that issuance. So yes, we can't start the project. We don't need to spend a lot out of our reserves for that, but anything recouped after that bond issue passes, we can recoup that through the bond. So the proposal is to split that, sell $10 million in September of 2020. Anything we incur from July to September, we can reimburse ourselves for that. The $10 million was a very specific number so that those could be bank qualified. And then follow in the spring of 2021, April of 2021, to sell the remaining 11.6 million that would fully fund. So that gives us a good staggered amount to process that. The bank qualified will cost us less as a district in interest. You all know this, you all are bankers. It piques your interest because that's a good way for local banks to invest in that. We have enough reserve in the debt service fund that we can pay that first spring payment without collecting taxes. There's enough reserves in there because under state auditor rule, you get to have a year advancement on your reserves, so we have enough to cover that. And only the 10 million would have sold at that point, so it would be a much lower interest payment. And a question was asked by a board member, I'm not sure who, but a question was asked by a board member, if we split it into two, would there not be some additional costs? So I got some updated information right before the board meeting. There would be some duplication costs in issuance for the district of $45,000, but the potential lower interest in spreading this out would save you close to $300,000 over the life of the bond. So it's win-win. You get to defer what the taxpayer's commitment is a year so that we don't hit them after COVID in this tax year. You still get your money in a timely manner. We are able to do bank qualified, so it attracts more buyers and a lower interest rate for us.
Piper Sandler sell them here locally, or are they going to throw them somewhere else?
It won't be Piper that sells it because we have under SEC now, Piper Sandler's financial advisor, so they will have to bid out who actually does that sell.
Otherwise, we won't get the bid on it, or not we, but I mean.
They'll be out there, you gotta have your broker find them.
But there is not a detriment to the district to do this. In timing, we can spend our own money in July, reimburse ourselves. It will be a lower interest model for us to sell bank qualified. Getting that 10 million in, we pay ourselves back for the first few months. And then by the time we get that far into the process, when we get to April, now you are running some risk. That 300,000 is going to be subject to interest in there's a lot of unknowns obviously in the interest world, but there's not anything that's detrimental. So this is the safest way for the Board of Education to defer that tax payment.
I don't have a crystal ball, but everything I'm reading and notes that I'm getting from folks, I think this rate structure is gonna be in place for a little while, so I think it's gonna be past 2021 for sure. So I think what we get, assuming this, not assuming when this passes, what we get in July or whatever, or June, whenever we sell them, it's gonna be real similar to what we get in September 2021. Or, so, in my opinion, so.
Yeah, and I agree, bank qualified versus gen market stuff right now is 30 or 40, maybe even 50 bips. That's a big percentage savings. It'll
Big number on 10 million.
certainly help offset the 45,000.
Yes.
That's great. And the big piece is we help out
Help
our
out
community.
taxpayers, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and, yeah.
So how are we communicating that?
So, we're communicating one step right now. And then next, we'll put out some messages through, social media, and then, and this will also be shared with, Standard Democrat as well. And then our bond committee will start putting this message out.
So do we have to,
We don't have to take action on it.
This is just information.
Just information. We're just, letting folks know what we're gonna do once the bond issue is voted in.
okay.
All right, thank you guys. We move to requiring action.
Okay. I'll let you.
I think you can, part A, you're up first.
Oh, do we need to go, yeah, we'll have to go back into executive session, will we? Yeah. I'm looking for a motion, or entertain a motion to, go into executive session following this.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Cantrell?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Osborne? Mr. Tanner?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Blees, excuse me.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, and next is B, approval of course curriculum. Mr. Mays, officiating team sports.
Yes, sir. Amy McGill approached me earlier this year and requested that we add a course in officiating team sports. I don't know if you're aware, but currently there's a shortage of officials in the state to officiate high school games, little league games, everything's pretty much a shortage around the whole state. One of the things that some of your districts are doing is they're offering an officiating team sports to try to give an opportunity for our students to have a chance to be an official themselves, so they can go through this course, they can learn the rules of each of these different sports and be able to officiate those, and then they can go on for certification, as the course description states, and be an umpire or a referee or whatever the course is, whatever the title is for that sport, and be able to earn money doing that. So I know that Jackson has this course at their district. Several other districts have this course as well. And Mr. McGill just thinks this will be a great opportunity for our students and a chance to earn some extra money. So anyway, unless you have any questions, administration would like to recommend the approval of the curriculum for officiating team sports. Do you have any questions?
I think it's a great idea.
Oh, I do have one question, Chuck.
Yes,
So this has the officiating, I just know as being part of this, would they teach scorekeeping too?
That I do not know.
I just know that's always hard to fill too.
Yeah, I will ask and see. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. I will find out though.
I had a motion for Rebecca.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Any further questions, comments, discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Next, we have, budget adjustment for the year 20.
And I wish I had looked at the agenda, the way it was laid out. Brian, you may have to direct us on how you want us to proceed, because I have in the budget adjustments the inclusion of the purchase of the iPads, which doesn't come till down the agenda for you to approve. So I guess we probably need to approve the budget adjustments without that, and then if the iPads are approved, we'll make that a second disclaimer to the budget adjustments. I'm not sure. My apologies, I just didn't, usually I direct Carrie on how this needs to flow, and I did not think of that. So let's look at revenues first. I went through multiple times, not only in preparing next year's budget, but also just in light of the unknowns for this year to see where we were gonna land. This is much more detailed than I would normally do in May. But I simply felt like I needed to get a good pulse on what we knew, the latest we know, and it's gonna change tomorrow. But this is where if we were to get to end today, I think this is where we would land. So I'm gonna just hit the highlights down through here. I will say that both on the revenues and on the expenditures, a lot of this is just cleaning up our finance program to match the federal program's budget in EPEX. That's something normally we would have done November, December. We just didn't get to it, and then we thought we would do it in March, and then chaos ensued. So this is very late in the year for that, but I'll explain that as we go on. So just going down through the revenues, you will see the May 2020 projections versus the working budget, and then the budget adjustment is the column to the far right. So overall, Brian, just for your sake in notes, the budget adjustment on revenues is a decrease in expected revenues of $438,429. The majority of that is going to come through the formula and proxy money. But just going down through here right now, again, somebody said earlier they don't have a crystal ball. I'm not really sure why our tax collections are reading $125,000 less. That's not to say that we won't get a big payment because they didn't have somebody in their offices in either county processing things. So we may get an abnormally high June delinquent payment. But if I look at history for 5 years and what we normally collect and where we are now, it's reading that we're going to be $125,000 down. Hopefully I'll have better news for you in June. Sales tax is down. Now that $216,202 is about threefold. When we adopted the original budget last June, we were going into this new virtual learning platform. We had high hopes for how we were going to do summer school. That would have driven some ADA because proxy money pays a certain amount times your average daily attendance from the prior school year. We didn't collect as many ADA over those summers because we didn't have as many kids complete those virtual courses as we thought we would. So we lost some money there, and we haven't adjusted this all year. And now, rather than paying at the $1,036 per ADA, the ADA was already down. We thought we would collect $1,036 per each average daily attendance. That's now just paying at about 80%. So we're going to realize a loss of at least $200,000, and by June that may have doubled. I don't know what they're going to do with that. So sales tax will be down. Earnings on investment, I've got it down $5,000. It's going to be lower than that. Luckily, our bank bid that was that we adopted last May did have a floor in it, but we were collecting a whole lot more than that floor, so that's going to drop down for the last couple of months. Food service is just kind of just hit or miss on some local funds on where the money needed to be. Student activities, that looks like a big number, being down that $215,000, but you've got offsetting adjustments to expenditures as well. That's just, a lot of that is because we shut down early. Daycare payments are down because we shut early, and we still have some more refunds that we need to pay out. The gifts, the $108,000 being up, that's not a windfall, that's just part of the restructuring of the DESI when we did the budget, and now they make us code it a little bit differently, so that's kind of smoke and mirrors. The good news in this, our one glorified line that truly is an increase, money that I did not expect, windfall, was state assessed railroad utilities. We collected $187,000 more. According to the counties, that will continue, so that should be a good revenue stream. We got access to some new pipeline or something, tracks, I don't know, I don't care, I don't want to give horse the mouth. It is a real number, and it's going forward. Basic formula is, you know, not to beat a dead horse here, but we know we lost money because of the error with the early childhood schedule from 18-19. So keep in mind, we're paying a $319,000 back from a prior school year. It's coming out of this year's formula, so we won't have that going forward. So this wouldn't look as dire. We are gaining $105,000 because DESI did let us go ahead and estimate ADA. So when we get our May payment, we will include this year's early childhood education kiddos, and we promise you that the schedule is right this year. We have worked very hard, that won't happen again. Transportation is down 17,000. Now that was the 7% cut that we heard, and then after I did this, they came back and said maybe it wouldn't be as much. So maybe we'll gain a little bit back there. Classroom trust fund money on the next page is, there's some loss due again to the ECE from FY19 because it affects, both line items are affected, but it's mostly due to, there's no casino money coming in. So we don't know how much we'll get in that. There's not really any other big thing. After that, you'll see an adjustment in food service revenues, and there will be an offsetting adjusting entry in the expenditures as well. I probably cut more in expenditures and should have probably shown more in revenue than what I'm showing, and I'll speak to that in a minute when we look at CEP. But the majority of the rest of this is just, again, squaring up federal programs, because here's the rule. If Chuck has a $100,000 allocation in Title IIA, he is required by federal law to budget that entire allocation, regardless of what his plan is. If his plan is to spend $50,000 this year and $50,000 next year, because of what he sees his vision for that funding, it does not matter. You have to do the full amount. But you put the offsetting amount in the expenditures. So if you spend $100,000, he'll collect $100,000. If he spends $50,000, we'll only collect $50,000. So it's a wash. So a lot of this is just cleanup. And I don't think there's really any surprises on the back page. Title IV, we did not lose an allocation there. That $62,000 on the last page that's going out of Title IV, we made a decision to move that into Title V. There's some more flexibility in spending and what we needed to do for district needs. That gave us a little bit more flexibility. So that's why you see a big increase on Title V than what was originally adopted last June. So again, overall, cleaning up some stuff, giving you some bad news, one line of good news. We're expecting May projections for revenues, if we ended today, would come in at $35,131,689. Okay, the expenditure side of things. So what you have in front of you is an expenditure adjustment of reducing expenditures by $821,005.41. Without the iPads, we will be reducing expenditures by $965,323.41 because the iPad was an increase to expenditures. So if we want to go with that, what I'm asking you to approve without the iPads is a reduction in expenditures of $965,323.41. And again, these first few items are us just matching our Sikeston finance program budget to Title I, 2A, Title IV, Title V. Those are the allocations. MMD, I'm sorry, we use so many acronyms, I didn't think. It's Missouri Model District money. We didn't put anything in the budget to start with. There was a offsetting entry in revenue. We're reimbursed after the fact on that grant. It works very weird. If Chuck has an expenditure, then they pay us for it. We don't really have a budget. We just, what we spend up to a certain amount, we get offsetting revenue. MOAT is Missouri Assisted Technology. It's a special ed thing, and Dr. Blissett had a need for some supplies there that we will get offsetting revenue. And then IDEA is our Part B federal funding for special ed. And again, we are just matching to the allocation, and we got a windfall of $50,000, and so we put that in the budget because I guarantee we've already spent it, so we'll turn it in and get some money for it. We'll skip over the iPad purchases to talk about later. And then on the back side, was part of it's budget cleanup, and a lot of it is just due to COVID. So the software tech, excess supplies, would they have expended that money if we'd have stayed in school? I don't know if they would have expended it all. But that $15,000 will help to fund our request for iPads. The athletic programs, we had a couple of things unexpected. You're saving $9,000 on officials because we shut down early. We had practice gym renovations that Dr. Robinson had completed, and that wasn't in the original budget in June because we didn't know that the new superintendent was gonna ask for that to be done. And anything that is athletic involved, we actually covered that with some excess monies that we would have in budget, but if it goes to athletic, it needs to be charged to athletics. So if you have a taxpayer come to you and say, what are you spending on your athletic programs? Those are things that need to be in those categories. So that's why it's shown under athletics. And then soccer field corrections, updates, I don't know what you really call it, I don't know what word to use there. We had budgeted $10,000 for that. There was a plan to do that. The fields are in much worse shape than what was anticipated, so the lowest quote came in at $21,000. So it's something that, in the opinion of the athletic director, and I think even Dr. Robinson spoke to this is something that we do need to remedy. The fields are in very poor shape. We don't feel like the bid was something that is gouging us. It's just more work than what we had anticipated a year ago, or actually 18 months ago when Andy would have said his budget would have been when he anticipated that. So 18 months have passed before the work has been done. So overall, under the athletics program, the expenditures are going up $32,000. Then the technology department and the maintenance department are two big line items. Now, part of that is due to COVID. You also know that you adopt a budget every June so that you don't have to have an emergency meeting to replace the boiler. We always have some ability to operate in that, and I use technology every year. If he has a good year and doesn't have to replace a lot of servers, then we come to you and ask you to do the iPad approval. That's kind of been our MO since we started that one-to-one program. I am a little concerned that we have as much left in maintenance, but both of those, I mean, we're pretty much done. They're gonna do some summer work that'll roll through June 30. But when COVID started, we actually, about 2 weeks before COVID hit, we had already kind of put the brakes on spending. Started trying to control that deficit for this year. If they hadn't expended it at that point, we said, well, let's see if we can't do without it. So you have $200,000. Now, I will say Mr. Sparland has a need for Chromebooks. The district has a need for Chromebooks. He was very hopeful that he would get to spend part of his excess budget this year and go ahead and get some Chromebooks into place. But we are so unsure where we are on Prop C money and some other things with revenue. I would encourage you to go ahead and accept this reduction for this year because of the unknown in revenue. If revenues don't come in as dire as we think they might in some areas, then we can spend that later. I mean, it's not like the money's gonna go away, it's just gonna roll into the next fiscal year and, you know, basically in the coffers. And we do have some ideas on how to cover that with some title monies. So hopefully the FY21, anything we need with Chromebooks, we can offset a lot of that with grant money. Salaries and benefits, there's not an adjusting entry there. I just need you to understand it is really close. I usually have a little bit more wiggle room, but when you take into consideration that we've brought an HR director on that we didn't know about last June, we're trying to train a transportation director. We had a great plan. we just had to dismiss school and not run buses. But we had committed to those individuals to bring them on, so that duplicated some. One big factor was the fact that we were able to reduce the health insurance rates, including the board paid, by 3%. And of course, with summer checks, that's a 3% reduction on 3 months of this year's budget. So that helps. So I think we'll be fine. We had some significant savings and substitutes. We probably would have had to have come to you with a budget adjustment to cover some excess salaries had we not had the savings due to COVID. So we'll take it as a win. Small Perkins adjustment, again, just a late cut that he had. Here's your offsetting to the loss in student activities revenues. Those are coming in about $150,000 under budget. Building supplies and equipment, that's just the gamut from pre-K to kindergarten to 12th grade to SCTC. It's just stuff that when we quit on March the 16th, we were like, okay, here's money left, tell us what you've got to spend, short of maybe some athletic events that we may still host later, and some graduation expenses, we just said money's gone, you don't have it anymore, we're putting it in, we're gonna keep it in the bank. Textbooks, we had a savings of $19,000, that didn't really have anything to do with COVID. The juvenile program, I put that on there, it's so nominal, it's silly for it to be there. But we didn't have it in the budget at all last June. I didn't want to go into the audit in the fall and then go, what is this, and why are you paying, why are you writing a check for $100 a month? And that was that juvenile program that we went into an agreement with. And for us to get to count the ADA, we have to pay them some type of rental. So the agreement was $100 a month, and that just wasn't in the June budget because that didn't happen until July or August. So that just gets us kosher with that program being in and you all signing off on checks at the end of every month. The virtual program, we didn't know where that was gonna hit. We do have some offsetting money in the formula. I just don't have a clear picture of the ADA it has generated, but I will tell you there's $42,000 worth of costs in the budget that I didn't ask you to approve last June because we didn't know what the cost was gonna be. So that's something that we will watch very closely going forward. After we get everything squared up with Desi, I can come back and say, yes, it cost you $42,000, but here's the ADA it generated.
The virtual program is the program that we approved last year?
Yes. And we would have had to do something with MOCAP anyway. Some of this is MOCAP charges.
Some of it is MOCAP.
Don't ask me one.
I was gonna say I can expound if you want, but I didn't, yeah.
But so we were gonna have some expenses because there was legislative action that we had to offer this. But we did go into we thought we would have more enrollment than what we've had. Now, there will be some offsetting revenue, but I don't know the number at this point. The next line item is exciting, but don't get used to it. We're not $100,000 down in therapy charges. It's just because we, again, ended school in March and we aren't servicing those students, which is the sad side of it. Same thing on transportation. We have about $22,000 left in fuel. We probably would have come to you with the opposite budget adjustment had we continued, because we'd have probably had at least one more big fuel cost. Food service is down. Again, we'll talk about food service a little bit more when we talk about CEP. The Board of Education was nice enough to agree for those first few weeks to make their staff whole, so it will cut into our surplus, but we still will end with the surplus. And then those last two adjusting entries are simply to offset. We had salaries and benefits in the system, and we think we're gonna be even on those, but because of the way the grant allocations were, we had to either add or decrease, so we've got to offset local to make those adjusting entries. So revenue adjustments, 438, 429 less, expenditure adjustments less, 965, 323 without the iPads. And with that adoption, looking at the big picture of things, with the iPads not in it, we would end somewhere around 12.6 for the year in balances. And we would have a surplus of 88,445 revenues versus expenditures for the year. And it changes if you approve iPads, but not much.
So overall, as it looks right now, we don't know how the revenue is gonna play out yet. But we've saved more when we turn school off than what we've lost in revenue thus far.
Thus far. Yeah, the wild card is Prop C, but yes. Now keep in mind that we had put the brakes on about a month before that, trying to close that deficit, trying to bring you all good news by June. So that helped because we cut some things down, but yes, for how it was handled and the way we were able to do food services, and the way that they came back and said that they would let we use the buses for 3 weeks to deliver meals. That's still going to be an allowable cost under the formula, which we did not anticipate. The other good news is that Ron in food service has just killed himself writing grants. We've gotten not a big one yet, but we've got $2,000 to offset some costs, and he's in the running for a $50,000 one. So. And this doesn't reflect anything for the CARES Act because we didn't know much about the CARES Act until a webinar yesterday. But the district is slated, you collect 84% of your Title I allocation. Our Title I allocation is just a little over 1.4. So our anticipation of that money is to come in at about 176.
Wow.
So that will, I was a lot more stressed about the Prop C and what we might look like in June until we realized how big a chunk of change that was. Now, I hope we get to use that for other things. We're waiting for some answers from the State Department on, we know what we can use that money for. We know what we think we will get. What we don't know is we made money whole for our support staff as well as our certified staff. So we have to find out how that affects like Title I assistance. Can we actually collect Title I dollars on those expenditures, or are we going to have to use the CARE Act for that? So
We'll go out on a limb and say they probably don't know either. If it's based on the PPP stuff,
yeah.
we've got about that much information for a 1,000-page bill,
Yeah.
and they still don't know what they're doing. So.
And it is about a 2.5-page, answer some questions, yes or no. If you want the money, obviously you're going to answer yes. You're going to put your comments in, and you get 75% of the money just boom. They just send it. So we should. I didn't put it in here because I thought we would collect it after July 1, but that will come in for this year. So we'll have an update on that. So even with the purchase of iPads, we're looking at a deficit for this year of $52,000 outside of wing. Now you understand we're deficit spending $1.4 million for wing because that bond money came in other years. But the bottom line is COVID actually cleared up some stuff for us.
Yeah, I think we said that in one meeting. We talked about that. That's a bad way to look at it.
Yeah. So
Is the CARES Act money on the title, is that what you've heard of as your school's assistance in this whole big thing? I mean, I know that there's a lot of state and local government things. And
yes, this is the federal government's Band-Aid for us. And then there's a governor, a state,
Years or something.
years, but they're not releasing much information on that. So there'll be another windfall. But one thing that we can do with the CARES Act money is buy technology. So should this type of situation come up again, we have the ability to remote educate. Now, in my opinion, everybody scrambled and did a bang-up job, and that's going to be a hard argument for the iPads in just a minute. I'm up next to that. But it's very, the rules are very loose on the CARES Act, and it's basically saying if you had excess salaries that you weren't able to fund, then use it for that. If you had expenses for remote education, use it for that. If you need to plan for this, again, spend it for that. And you have till September of 2022 to expend it. But 75% up front by just answering about 6 questions.
Jeez, sounds like the EIDL.
On the virtual program, are we gonna talk about that in the near future? Any update on that? I don't wanna ask questions now if we're gonna talk about it.
Yeah,
I think once we get, what we need to be able to do is to look at the ADA generated by that, and that's based on, the ADA is actually not, because the students are doing it virtually, they're not tied to attendance day by day. Their attendance is strictly based on their grade for that course, the grade and the percentage of completion of that course. And so once we get that information in, we can process it compared to the ADA and what percent we get. And we'll be able to.
So we don't have all the information that we need.
No, I won't have until after the 15th.
All we know is what we've spent.
Right.
Now, and I will say, in all fairness, the 42,000 is probably not a surprise to Mr. Mays. I didn't quite get, when I presented the budget to you last June, I thought some of the stuff we had spent in the prior fiscal year covered some things that were coming forward, and he came to me in July and went, no, that wasn't right. So that was just me not quite understanding how we were going to pay when students enrolled.
The really, and I don't want to take up your time on that, the surprise we had was we did have more students participate in MOCAP, which is different than our virtual program. And so that was a little bit of a surprise. We've had more from that. It's basically, the AD is basically calculated the same way, but that incurred some extra costs that I wasn't planning on. But for the most part, yeah, you're right. I was pretty much planning that we would have that expense.
So they went the MOCAP route as opposed to what we were on.
Yes. It wasn't a lot, but it was more than I expected.
Why do you think they went in that direction? Was it because of not knowing we offered the program?
No, we made sure everyone knew. We had, sometimes you wouldn't know for sure, but they were just adamant. Most of the time, I think they had some beef with the school district for one reason or another, and that's for the ones that would go, we want to go with this, the virtual academy instead. But we still have, the bulk of the students went through our program.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Looking for a motion?
I'd like a motion, please.
Take a break. Entertain a motion to approve the budget adjustments that this board has recommended.
So
Second.
Can't imagine there's any further discussion. Is there any further discussion or questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? All right. Uh-oh, did he hang up?
He's gone.
You've had a low battery thing on there,
Did I?
so you may have died.
Yep, it sure did. Look at that.
I can, you just want me to call him and
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
we can put him on audio because, well, we're probably not gonna have any more, we'll have one roll call, but
Yeah.
that won't make any difference.
Okay, next is Pepsi contract, consideration for approval of the Pepsi contract. You have the contract in front of you that provides some upfront money, $50,000 and then $12,500 each year. For 5 years, it's a 5-year contract for Pepsi providing beverages throughout the district.
Nickel, you caught that, didn't you?
Yes, he did.
Hey, Chad. Hey, it's Brian. I'm gonna put you on speaker. We're just gonna have you on speaker since we're not doing any roll calls other than bills. Are you there? Okay.
So Lori, how is this different from our contract now?
Our contract now is $15,000 a year for 5 years.
Okay. Get a little more money.
I'll make a motion, we accept the Pepsi contract.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
All right, next consideration, student meal and adult meal pricing.
As the Board of Education knows, we made the decision for the FY20 school year to go district-wide community eligibility provision, which means that regardless of income, students eat free. And we're going to ask you to take that into consideration next. But regardless of what your intent is as far as to continue or not continue CEP, we are mandated under USDA guidelines in the National School Lunch Program to review and look at the income that you're bringing in if you were having students pay for meals. So they have a paid lunch equity tool that they haven't put out yet because of COVID. But we were able to get, DESE has not made it available, but we were able to go through our food service management company through their back channels in USDA, and we did get the tool late yesterday afternoon. I had prepped for BDOC stating that there's a caveat in this, regardless of what calculation comes up on what you should be charging for a meal. If you're charging $1 for a meal and it says you should charge $5, they can only make you go up a dime a year. So we had gone into this, historically we need to raise a dime every year to keep up with what they consider to be fair and equitable, to help locally support that program as opposed to your state and federal. So that's exactly what the tool came up with. Well, actually, the tool came up with that we needed to go to $2.85. We currently charge $2.70 for a meal. So if we were to do paid lunches for next year, the Board of Education would need to set that at a minimum of $2.80 for 5th through 12th grade, and $2.55 for pre-K through 4th grade. That would be a dime increase. And should you choose not to put that into place, then you would have to be willing to offset local dollars from another area and write a check to actually the school lunch account. So it's the administration's recommendation that you set your pricing to increase school lunches for a dime next year.
Make a motion to accept the recommendation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, Ms. Gordon, the show continues, Steve.
Just love name Jim. So, consideration of community eligibility program. The board, we did that with our elementary schools for a couple of years. We started out with a provision to breakfast, where everybody ate a free breakfast at the kindergarten center. That was very successful. We probably lost about $8,000 a year in possible revenue. You can't say you would have collected that, but every time we went back to Ms. Hobeck and Ms. Carball, they were like, it is worth it. I mean, the kids just perform better. They're not in the nurse's office by 9 a.m. crying, so it was a good thing to do. So then we took a leap of faith and went into our elementary schools because they automatically have a high enough identified student percentage. Anything over 40%, you qualify for CEP. The higher that percentage goes, if you get into the 50s, then the more likely you are to have a revenue expenditure neutral program and not actually lose funds. And then last year I came to the board and said, let's try this pre-K through 12. We had a new food service partner. They were bringing basically a new game into town. They were confident that they could build participation by 10% based simply on the way they do their meals. And so we were on track. I talked at several board meetings. I had the question during the finance report several times, where are we on food service? We were on track for a $300,000 surplus. That was the guarantee from SFE. And we were making $1,700 to $1,800 a day profit on how we were operating the program and not collecting for paid meals. So it was win-win. Now the situation changed when we shut down and went to a different type of meal service, because obviously the participation level was not going to be there. We had a good participation level delivering on the buses. Then at 3 weeks in, not only was everybody just worn out from it, we were exposing people to 300 and 400 people at 300 and 400 people at a time at bus stops. And it just wasn't, at some point, when you quit asking your staff to do that. And then you're also preparing food for 3,000 kids. So if someone in that program gets ill, then there were lots of complications. So we went to the distribution sites and our numbers dropped, as we knew they would, because you're not walking to a door with the food and saying, here it is. And it's slowly continued to dwindle down. It looks like we're gonna land somewhere around 1,200, 600 breakfast, 600 lunch a day. We have gone to 7 days of meals per week. We have to do that in a Monday through Friday scenario, but we're actually doing 7 days. So it looks like with the loss of meals and the fact that for those first 3 weeks we did support a full schedule for SFE and asked them to go outside their meal to student ratio, which they knew would eat into the surplus guarantee. It looks like we're going to end the year at about $150,000 surplus. But I'm telling you, had we not had this, we would have been 320,000 surplus. So, especially in light of unknown economic factors, the administration's recommendation is that you go forward, and this will always be approved annually, but that we continue the program pre-K through 12. The high school still doesn't qualify by itself.
Why is that?
It's just when
They don't fill out the forms? Or
well, no, we don't have to
we
do
don't
the
have to
forms
do
under the
forms.
program. It's
Participation.
They're below 40%, right?
yeah, it's the direct certification and SNAP program and TANF through the state. When we do that direct certification download monthly, you identify those students and they just fall under the cusp of that 40%. But you can pair them with another school and still come out okay. Now, I will say this, and you won't have to listen to me ever say it again, because I won't be here next May. But you have to remember that the only reason this program works is breakfast in the classroom. We run 97 to 99% participation where we do breakfast in the classroom. If we were not doing this, you could not do this 5th grade up. We have after second bell, after the bell program at the alt school and at the high school. We serve 200 breakfasts a day out of the library in that after the bell program, where they let them come between first and second period because they're awake now and they're hungry. so they go by and do that grab and go. So the only way this works is if you keep thinking outside the box, do that breakfast in the classroom program, even in the new elementary school that you're going to build. You still need to continue to do that in the program because that's what keeps your participation at 99%. I've also talked with Ron and SFE about doing some grab and go carts at 5th and 6th in the junior high to catch them in different areas. If they roll a grab and go cart into that junior high before school, into that gymnasium, there'll be more kids grab that and take it to their first period class than going through the lunch line, because there's just a stigma associated with going through the lunch line. But if the cart comes to you, then it's kind of fun and exciting. So that's the only thing that makes this work, because if you ever drop below those percentages and let those breakfast numbers go down, then you're going to lose money. Now, I can't sit here and do due diligence and tell you that you would not have a much higher surplus had we not gone pre-K through 12. If you look at the numbers and put in our identified student percentage and what we would collect using local dollars, we have the ability, if your participation level stayed the same, on paper it says you would have another $300,000 because you had paid local money coming in, but your participation levels aren't going to stay there. If they're not just getting the meals, they're still going to do something different. So it's a double-edged sword there. They can tell you would make more money, but I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what your percentage would drop, but it would go down drastically in 7th through 12th grade. Participation would go down. So Ms. Hollifield can tell you she spent a lot of time in the fall going into the high school early morning, and people were just sitting around and waiting. Come on, guys, it doesn't cost you anything. Let's go through this line. There's going to be something here you're going to like. If nothing else, take a granola bar and eat it later. So they're not going to do that if they're paying for the meals. They're just going to either not eat or bring a breakfast sandwich. So it's the administration's recommendation that you continue for the FY21 year to do the community eligibility provision for pre-K through 12.
Me, and I know we can't use the surplus on general fund or whatever. It's got to be specific, but to me, if we even break even or just make a little bit, I mean, we're providing all of our students meals every day.
Yes.
Great.
That's my opinion.
Yes.
Of course, I think we want to make surplus because there's going to be equipment that breaks down and all those things. You want to replace that.
Well, and we have seen families participate in these drive-through distribution sites that would have never done this in a normal summer feeding program, because everybody in this room and everybody out there, there's just so many unknowns. So if you can go through and get, you got 4 kids and you can go through and get a week's worth of meals for them, then, it's a ham sandwich and a turkey sandwich and a bag of carrots and some juice and some milk. And if your kiddos like that, then it's win-win. And it's just something that, 1, you don't have to be terrified to go into a grocery store. And 2, it's just another $25 or $35 that they're putting back for the week for the unknown. So it would be detrimental, I think, to our community not to consider this for this next school year. And keep in mind, we're not fighting people over debt, because you would lose.
Yep.
I mean, if we went back to paid meals, you would be back up at $30,000 and then collecting debt and turning people over to debt collection or pulling trays, or, it's awful.
So SFE, that said last year when it came to us, and you mentioned it, that they expected a 10% increase in participation. Before everything happened, were we seeing that?
We were seeing that. I'm not going to give them all the credit, because because we didn't charge for the meals, and you had administrators going over and taking 20 big football players through a line and saying, go get breakfast. But I do think that their meals and the way they do things, the way they interact with students did have a good effect on our participation level.
I'll make a motion, we accept the recommendation.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Okay, next, annual facility rental rates. This is looked at every year. There are no changes based on the previous year, and speaking with Mr. McGill and Ms. Portland, they will remain the same.
My only question is, so wing being the newest, is there a reason we don't try to rent the gym or the cafeteria there?
I don't know that we don't try.
I
We're
just didn't see any rates for it. It's just,
probably just,
I mean, I'm not saying there's a huge demand, but it's
Right.
one of the nicest facilities.
it is, probably just because it wasn't on there last year and this is the first time it's come up. I mean, that we would never not consider that even though they're not listed.
Okay.
And it would be an applicable rate,
Yeah.
because that's based on what we pay, you know, on average, for the APCO staff and electricity, and I mean, it would be
Similar to some of the-
similar, yes.
Okay.
Make a motion, we approve the annual facility rental rates. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, next, purchase of iPads for fiscal year 20.
Okay, so, for several years now, when the June budget is presented, because we were presenting a deficit budget, and this is a large line item expenditure, we have waited until spring to see how things work, to see if we could fund it without deficit spending or not a huge deficit. So what we adopted a while ago put us at an $88,000 surplus. So if these purchases are approved, it will put us at a $55,000 or $56,000 deficit for the year. But I probably have the best argument I've ever had in my life. The reason you want to approve these iPads this year is COVID-19, because they did not miss a beat in grades 7 through 12 in remote education. The devices were in place. You had a handful of junior high students and high school students that, for whatever the circumstance, weren't taking those devices home, but those were a workaround, and they just didn't miss a beat because we had those in place. From 7th grade down, it was done, but it was a little bit more challenging in getting those devices out there.
Did we have, I know we talked about it, but I don't know if we ever heard a report. You don't have to give me a number necessarily. Did we have a lot of students that didn't have access to the internet? Was that I'm sure there were some, was that like a huge problem, or was it?
The JC's helped us out tremendously.
It wasn't, I mean, well, I would say it is a huge problem anytime a child can't access education.
Right.
I mean,
by numbers.
As far as the number, it wasn't a significant, huge number. Mr. Mays, what was it about, what, 20%, or was it less than 20%?
I would say, I think it's around 20% is probably what the number is.
20% of our students in the,
That didn't have internet access.
wow, that's a bigger number than I would have thought.
And if I could speak to well, a lot of, what happens is a lot of parents say, our kids have access to cell phones, but doing the work on cell phones is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
I talked to some parents and students about that, it was difficult. If I could, may I add one thing too,
Yeah, absolutely.
to that, we did have, of course, high school and junior high, pretty much like you said, didn't miss a beat, but the other schools also had parent pickup, so if they didn't have internet access, the parents could come by and pick up packets of information, they did that. Even junior high, even though they had iPads, they had some parents pick up packets. I know Lee Hunter was delivering packets when the parents would come get the food, they also picked up packets of work if they didn't have internet. So I agree with it. It went as well as it could. It would be better if we had more devices, and by far, junior high and high school work better than anywhere else.
We meet monthly, we meet March, obviously, but we have a monthly iLearn committee meeting. And so the people that are in those meetings outside of central office, I mean, it is their life, it's what they do, it's the reason they're employed with the district. And they're the ones in the trenches every day. And one of them got very vocal at the February meeting and said, I just think it is ridiculous that as proven as this program is at this point, you still don't put it in the budget. Because we can't educate the way we educate now without these devices. So just put it in for FY21 and don't leave us on pins and needles. And that person has a valid point. But again, I have an obligation to you all to bring you the best case scenario that I can. But if we're going to be able to fund this, now the one thing that I do choke on a little bit, but it's just part of the program, is we're asking you to approve 300 iPads. They're the Generation 7, and it comes with Apple Care, and so we can get, for $88,200, we can get 300 iPads, the latest and greatest, because of the education discount that we qualify for. And then we can add the $79 worth of Apple Care for 3 years plus warranty on that, and get all 300 iPads for $111,900. And then I'm going to ask you to approve $32,418 worth of cases.
I think we.
But you can't send
I'm living proof of a child without a case. You might as well just stomp on it and turn it back in. Without a case, it's going to get busted.
Why that case versus the other two options?
Well, so let me speak to what we're doing. So the first request is 300 iPads that will service the incoming freshmen and do the rotation schedule. We have 275 8th graders. They're assuming we would, 245. They thought they would be at 270, and then we needed a handful of 7th graders. So that's how we got to the 300. And then when you look at the cases, because it's a Generation 7, the size of the iPad changes. So even if we had good cases, we would still have to buy cases for the new. So we need 300 of the new cases for the Generation 7. Then we need to do 280 new cases for the 7th and 8th graders, because what we found is after the kid carries it for a year, you don't want to, it's just not feasible to pass that case on to the next one. They've done their job, they've protected the device, but they're pretty rough, and it's probably not something you would want your kiddo to come home with the other case that had been used for a year. Because 7th and 8th graders are going to be using the 5th and 6th generation iPads, and those have been discontinued. We are asking in this bid to buy 2 years worth of those 5th and 6th generation cases. So 280 for FY21 and 280 cases for FY22, because the people that sell them say it's going to be hard to find them, and then you're going to be trying to bid for them on eBay and pay a ridiculous amount of money. So what we're asking for in the $32,418 is 300 cases for the new iPads, Generation 7, 2 sets of 280 cases for the 5th and 6th generation iPads that will be housed at the 7th and 8th grade center for the next 2 fiscal years. And then 200 cases of that are on the iPads that are going on their 3rd and 4th year. The cases have just disintegrated. The same student's been carrying them now for 2 to 3 years, and so they just need to replace 200 of those. So it's 1,060 cases. We're buying 1,060 cases and 300 iPads if this is approved. So that would be a total of, let me get back to my budget adjustments.
$137,000, wasn't it?
It's $144,318 for all of it. Now, this is something that if we have no other use for the CARES Act money, you can pay for this with CARES Act money.
Yeah.
We can buy Chromebooks with CARES Act money. But right now, this is being recommended to you as a local dollar expenditure.
I think we have to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm a motion that we accept the recommendation of administration to purchase the iPads and cases.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, next we have construction manager as agent for the 2020 proposed bond project. We interviewed 3 different companies, McKinstry, S.M. Wilson, and Navigate Solutions. We went through a bid proposal process as well as interviews last week, where we got to sit in front and hear from each company. It is the committee's recommendation that we go with, excuse me, I want to make sure I get, that we go with Navigate. And I would like some of the committee members to share some of the reasons why we selected Navigate for our bond. So, Navigate the building solution. So if any committee members would like to share?
I'd say it was based on, first of all, they had an overall, a really awesome presentation. They had great detail in their presentation. You know, went and dug down into specifically what they were gonna be able to do and how they were gonna be able to do it. Their references were really good. Their reputation is really good. They are doing this work. They have streamlined it to where they are only doing construction manager as agent as their entire company's focus. They don't do anything else, and they focus on public works. So that's really, they've found a niche, and they've found ways to carve out and not add on, but carve out costs for, you know, the end user. And they were by far the least expensive, and they were very enthusiastic and really wanted to work with this and are in a position and posture to be able to jump right in and do it. And that's, you know, just a very broad summary from my perspective.
Yeah, I thought they were absolutely heads and tails above the other two, and the cheapest by far. It was a real easy choice for me to make, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Very sharp group of people. Not that the other ones weren't, but this group stood out. They're coming off a big, huge project in Union, Missouri, and the team that was here worked on that project, and they are ready to rock for us. But I was really impressed with the whole group, and got a lot of confidence in their abilities to bring a fantastic new elementary school to Sikeston.
And
Would they do the C building too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was really impressed with, because every, you know, person who company submitted a bid talked about the importance of, you know, local vendors and local contractors being a part of it. But I really loved their open house process for inviting local contractors in and local vendors in order to just helping them bid on the different parts of the construction.
And they have relationships with, you know, people in the construction industry and the general contractors, and they have worked with a lot of them in the past, and that's who they want to group and get together with, local vendors, and have them meet each other and kind of learn of each other to start getting that local connection.
They're from St. Louis,
So it's our recommendation, bring to our board, Navigate Building Solutions for our bond petition.
Make a motion, we accept the recommendation to accept Navigate as our construction manager as agent.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
I would like to add to that, if maybe we could see, since we're going to hire them, if they could give the bond committee very soon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can pass some of those things like local vendor meetings and some of the things that they're talking about, pass it along to start assimilating that prior to the vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure they're very eager to support and do that work. All right, next consideration for 1-year extension of copy release.
We have historically, for probably 15 years now. Rather than going out and buying copy machines on our dime, we do a per copy, per page lease agreement. The life of the machines historically have been about 5 years, so it's on a 5-year rotation. So this would have been the year to put that out for bid. We actually started working on it, started talking with Steve Sparling because it'll be his first year in the district having done this. Kim Carter's worked with it before. We actually started talking about it in February, had plans to go ahead and put out the RFP in March, and then obviously had to shut things down. And this is an involved process. This is lots of people bidding. This is bringing big crews of people through the buildings. Technology has to take them around. They basically lay eyes on every drop cable that we have that connects to a, because we use our copiers as printers as well. We have very few individual printers in the district. So we just went ahead, and in some years this would not have been a good recommendation to the Board of Education, because some years we have equipment that is on its last leg. We have more cost. We don't have a cost, but we just have constant service calls and principals calling me and saying, my machine is terrible, when do we get rid of them? That's not the case. Our machines are in very good shape. So we did a review of the machinery that we have in place. It has more. It actually has about a good 18 to 24 month life capacity left on the majority of the machines. A couple that are maybe approaching a sooner death than the majority of them, they will be replaced individually. But we reached out to Shepherd's. We did an evaluation of the copiers. The life expectancy on them is sufficient to do a year extension, and Shepherd's is more than willing to keep the current rates in place, which are very reasonable. It's just at a penny a page on black and white copies. So, and they've been very respectful of the process every year. We had vendors obviously wanting to bid. We have reached out and given them a heads up that just because of COVID. Because the other thing that would come into play when things start to get back to normal in June, this new equipment would have come in July. So where was it coming from? Was it going to get here? Were we actually going to be able to get things in place and hooked up and be ready to go? And the technology department was looking at us and going, when we pass the bond issue, we have to move every computer there is at Lee Hunter and relocate it. So this is just a win-win. So this can be put off till next spring without detriment to the district at all, if the board is willing to extend that.
Make a motion to extend the copier lease.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, next, consideration approval for Achieve 3000 program.
We're gonna tag team this.
These were cut off just a little bit, I didn't realize it until just now, but we'll have it on the screen in just a moment.
So Mr. Mays is passing out, again, this is gonna be kind of a tag team event here. He is passing out a copy of the PowerPoint, and then he's gonna pull that up as well. And then Dr. Blissett and I are gonna kind of attack this from the secondary level as well as the elementary level. First of all, while he's pulling that up, I think we all know as leaders in this district and people making decisions in this district that we have had concerns about some of our students that are not reading at grade level from pre-K to our seniors in high schools. Dr. Robinson came in with a vision for academic success and for us to see improvement in our achievement. This program, Achieve 3000, has shown us that it is going to provide what we think is necessary for every kid in our district. What we're presenting tonight is just going to be K through 10, just because that is a fit for what we need at the time. So you'll see, we're just going to kind of quickly go through this PowerPoint and talk a little bit about some of how it's going to look, what it's going to look like at the different levels throughout our district, and explain to you what Achieve is. And go ahead. You're trying. I'm like, wait, the first piece is going to address the elementary. It is pre-K, starting at our pre-K.
I'm just gonna stand over here.
Wireless is not acting wirelessly.
Okay. Give me a moment here.
So while he's doing that, I'll just say this. This is, okay, I'm sorry, I'll let her talk. Go. Oh, no, well, stop. So just let me say, well, he's getting us going. The thing that is so beneficial about this is it's going to meet our kids where they are, regardless of the grade, whether it's elementary, whether it's our junior high or middle school. The selling point to me with this program is how it reaches our kids at the level that they are. With that being said.
And for our pre-K through our second grade program, I think one of the things that really reached out to us and really touched base with us was it's going to transform our readers from emergent to independent readers. And it's basically geared towards building those foundational skills, which a lot of our students are missing. So it's geared, as Ms. Hollifield said, directly to their level. So they have on this Smarty Ants, which is the name of the pre-K through second grade program. Each one of those students will have an individualized program geared to their specific needs and their specific levels. So it's kind of like an extra teacher in that classroom where that teacher can't get to each, she can work with each individual student, but this is a program just for them. And it's kind of, they have a personal coach. So this ant that you see, Mr. Smarty Ants here, it's kind of like this personal coach, mentor, cheerleader, and kind of taking them through the process from being an emergent reader into an independent reader, which is what we're really looking for. And like I said, building upon those foundational skills, that's key for us right now.
Yes. So she kind of talked about this already, about the mastery, so. This is based on some information that came out of the Bay District schools in Florida. This just shows you how they improved and what their growth was. We really feel strongly that our students are going to see growth. Now, as Dr. Robinson and I spoke today a little earlier, we're probably not going to see that impact next year on our test map scores, but this is something that over the next 2 to 3 years, I think is going to greatly impact our achievement on our map scores. But more importantly than our map scores, it's going to help individual students with reading and with the comprehension and being able to get that content level. This literacy platform is based on a Lexile score. Right now you hear us talk a lot about kids reading at grade level. They're reading below grade level. They're reading at second grade level, third grade level. They compare this with a score called a Lexile score. And I actually have a sheet if you're interested at some point that compares that to grade levels. But it's what it allows you to do. I'm a social studies teacher by trade. So if I'm in a social studies class and I have 10th graders in a class and I want them, and you can see here, this kind of shows you a class and the students having different Lexile levels. So one is reading at a 400, one at a 650, one at a 1250. And that is this is probably a very typical of a classroom at any level. But I can provide them with the same content. Maybe it's an article, maybe it's something I want them to read that's based in the social studies, and it's going to deliver it at the level they need, at the Lexile level that they need. So all students are getting that content, but it's going to be at their level. Still challenging them, but I think it's something, I personally think it's going to be a game changer in our classroom. Go ahead. Here's kind of how it works. They'll do a level set assessment. So the students in the first week or so of school will be given this assessment that will assign them this Lexile score. And then based on that, it will differentiate for that particular individual student. Not a group of students, not that you're in the Blue Jays but individually.
It's almost like voodoo stuff, isn't it?
It's really amazing and very similar to Zern. You've heard us talk about Zern with math. It continues to push those kids as they master, and it challenges them, but still gives them at a level that they can comprehend and handle on a daily basis. And throughout this differentiation, it has embedded assessment that, like I said, moves them along as they need to. I will say this too, we have had, and I may be jumping ahead of the slide, but I'm going to go ahead and throw this in here. We've had some teachers that piloted this, and Mr. May, Dr. Mays, would you share, I know you've had discussions with them personally, just kind of give a little testimony of what they saw and how they felt, what they felt about.
And I'm not a doctor, but I played one of the board meetings, so. No, basically what we did, Dr. Robinson wanted us to do a pilot, or work with the Chief 3000 to do a pilot. So we had about 9, I believe, teachers that were piloting this year, and they did just as Ms. Hollifield said. They did a level set assessment, got the Lexile score for their students, and then they proceeded to use this program. And they used it a lot like Zern. And so the way this works is you can have students work in this program on a rotating basis. What it does is it gives articles of interest to what the students are studying at that time, and then they can work through. And again, as Shannon was saying earlier, this program will put that article into the Lexile level of the student. So what you're able to do is to share the same content with all your students, but it'll be at their reading level. So everyone can comprehend what you're talking about. And based on doing that, then the students can progress as they go through class. So it works out great in English classes, but it's also great in science and social studies because you can bring in science and social studies articles, again, at the interest level and the grade level of the students, and they can progress through those. And as they progress, they will actually gain their Lexile level, and the program will automatically adjust and make it, raise the difficulties as they go forward. So students continue to show that growth in their reading levels as they go forward. We had very good feedback from the teachers that use this. They love the reports. They love being able to see the growth of the students. They felt like that the students were making big gains, and they also felt like the students enjoyed what they were reading. Ms. Snow at Lee Hunter, for example, said that she showed great gains with what she was working with, and she also was able to send those parent reports home so the parents could see how they were progressing. Anyway, is there anything else that I missed? I know we talked about it before, but it's just a good...
It is, and I think it decreases the level of frustration with the students. A lot of times it's not that they cannot comprehend the information or that they're not getting that mastery, but if they can't read it, that's harder for them. So we're giving them a leg up on that and giving them some extra tools and resources to help them get to that so they can master those concepts.
Yep.
Is this like, do the teachers choose subject matter articles? Is that what it is? It's the articles that the kids are reading?
They can. So the option is you can have Achieve match articles specifically to your curriculum and content areas, or teachers can do it themselves and identify those different things. And this is what they call a blended learning model. Kids have the ability to work on their own, but it's best served where teachers are working in small groups with kids. So it's not just like, get on the computer, I'm gonna go check my email. No, it's like, get on the computer, let's have some discussion, let's do some writing based on this article. So that way you're just attacking all these different aspects of learning.
Did you introduce this as Kate?
I did, and I'll say this, I did not specifically focus on Achieve. We brought 4 or 5 different companies in, and with our reading specialists and teachers and administrators, and let them go through this process, score and choose what they thought was the company they thought was best for the district.
And by far, Achieve was better than any of the ones we set through.
And the biggest selling point is what Dr. Robinson was just saying. It does address the students where they are, and that was one of the things that was stressed as we went through this process looking into different companies. We wanted something that would not just address the low kids, the high kids, would address every kid on every grade level they were at, or reading level they were at, and Achieve does that.
To me, that's been one of the age-old questions to educating, is you've got a classroom full of different kids, and just like that says, you got one kid that's gifted, one that reads at a lower level. How do you give them all this information when maybe the gifted kid can just go right through it, and the kid in the back or wherever with a low reading level doesn't get it?
Yes.
Heck, this does it for you. Holy moly.
And then that's just going to prompt, everyone can contribute to a discussion. Everyone can contribute to a writing project or to a group project. That oftentimes that's a barrier for kids, and that's why they maybe act out. Maybe sit over there and they're not a part of the group as you want them to as far as participation in class. That's what I see for it, especially the secondary. What I would think I would use it in my classroom.
And I want to stress too, it's the same. It's not a different article or an article that kind of comes. It's the same article, just with different vocabulary depending on where the student is. So it's like Shannon said. Then you can have a group discussion. Every kid can interact because they all got to read that content and all were able to understand it.
Yeah.
So it's truly reaching kids.
It
where
is
they
truly
are. It's
reaching kids where they are.
So is the idea here, so let's just say Aaron and I are in the same class, and let's say Aaron's he's pretty smart, he's at level 1500, and let's say I'm at 850. Is the idea here, besides the fact that I'm gonna now participate in a conversation that maybe I couldn't or wouldn't normally participate in because I don't understand or comprehend the content, but is also the idea here is that by the end of the year,
Yes.
I'm no longer at 850,
Yes,
that I'm at this higher level,
you're gonna show growth,
I'm gonna show growth.
yes,
We both will, because you're
yes.
getting on our level of understanding.
Yes. And his is gonna, you know, again, he's gonna be challenged as well, even at that higher level.
And you're gonna be motivated because now you can participate in the same discussion Aaron's participating in. So you're gonna be motivated because that's a lot of times what the biggest issue with kids are is they have that sense of sense of failure that they can't do it. Now you can do it, so now you want to get better because you can see that you are capable of doing this and being able to participate. I think that's a lot where Zern, I know we're not talking about Zern, but that's a lot of where Zern has their success, is they allow kids to be successful and allow kids to see themselves as being successful.
Yeah, and I would say the success that we've seen with Zern is similar to what we have to do with Achieve, if you guys approve this, is that there's a certain amount of time that they have to spend each week in order to see the growth and improvement. The slide that had the bar graphs is if you implement this with fidelity, then you're going to exceed the expectations that the company set. If you do it with fidelity and kids are on it, and kids will want to be on it because they have national competitions. We set our own competitions for the time out of class that kids participate.
Is this program done to the iPad or
Well, it
or on
can,
a smart board or, no, I
It-
couldn't do a smart board, but it's an individual.
It's a web-based.
It's
It's
web-based,
web-based.
web-based, online.
So you could use a home computer, you could use an iPad, you could use any device that,
But like at elementary school or pre-K, they're gonna have to go to the library or whatever.
Well, no, it can be
Take turns.
projected on, like, if they have the smart boards or anything, you know.
it'll be on their, it can be on their devices.
Yeah, it's on their
Yeah.
mobile devices.
Where it was
But they don't.
They all have
they don't
individual
all have
devices.
where it was piloted at, they were able to use iPads in high school, Chromebooks in elementary. No, they don't all have a device, but they don't preserve either. But if they have enough devices that they can do in elementary, for example, where you can rotate kids from station to station, they can make it work.
Oh, so you don't need a whole class.
You don't have to have a whole
No.
class.
You're working in groups
Yeah.
of 5 or 10 or whatever.
Maybe with CARES money, maybe that'll help. But even without, they can do stations and make it work.
I'll give you an example, we go into the elementary to see do observations, and you'll see a teacher with, 10 kids here doing a lesson, and there'll be a group over here of 3 or 4 or 5 that are working on their Zern lessons with their headphones, that's how I see it being utilized.
And they're using
Elementary.
stations anyway, so
Yes.
that's how they learn. They rotate stations and they do that. So you would have that set up throughout the room.
So they just log in with their login and
And
that's how it
they're
knows
even
what
remote
level
ones can do
you're at?
that, yes.
Mhm.
So when they log in, then it's specific to
Mhm.
the person.
And that's based upon that assessment that they give to get that original Lexile score and so it's built upon from there.
I switched slides on you.
That's okay, that's just talking about, we've already kind of talked about
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
You've talked about the report.
That's the reports.
And so one of the things we did not have in here, it also has, where this can be done in English and in Spanish, and we have a growing population of our English language learners, so that would be a help in that, and it's, basically while they're learning, English, they can read these things in their native language, and it's an extra support for them, so that they're have continuous learning, and they're not being neglected in that aspect as well. They can still learn in their native language while learning the English language. And we do have a growing population, so it does come in that also. And that's a great plus for the teachers as well, trying to find those supplemental materials in a different language and doing that, they can get that here as well.
You're a lot smarter than me, came up with this.
So now I'm gonna just real quickly talk about the investment it's gonna be for, us. In the first year, we're looking at,
Now the other shoe
I don't think you have a handout for this either.
No.
The first year, Second year, 122,500, and the third year, 103,707.
But you gotta think, pre-K,
Pre-K through
10th
10th grade.
That's,
What's
why not the, juniors and seniors?
If you do the through 10th grade, that gets you through English 1 and English 2, which is primarily where you're going to have this type of instruction. When you get into English 3 and 4, you're getting into literature, and it's not quite as focused on this.
What was the last year again? Sorry.
10th.
103.
103,707.
And I'll let you know, part of the expense, one is it's a robust program, it's a very effective program. But also is they have a very intensive professional development plan that comes with it. So they will be here every month doing PD with teachers so that you can do this with fidelity. They'll be in the classroom modeling, working alongside teachers so that we get our money's worth and we do this properly.
And so we guarantee them a 3-year contract, is that what the deal is? And then,
Yeah.
okay, and then you'd renegotiate. I mean, obviously, you got pre-K or kindergarten, you expect them to use this
And
all the way up.
And then the key is now you have experts, so you pull out the PD. So now it's just the programming. So you have teachers who can train teachers.
Do you have any results or information from Kate as to once they implemented it, have they been able to compare their literacy and growth?
Yeah, if you remember, when I interviewed, I gave you guys a white paper, that was all based on the growth and the improved lifestyle level that kids show in the course of a school year. And how,
I don't remember.
I know, how some kids doubled their lifestyle levels in a year's time. And I can share that with you guys again, but it produces.
So, I think it's a great program, but how, is there any thoughts on how we might cut $100,000 to pay for it, or is it just gonna be? I think it's great. I'm not saying we don't do it, I'm just wondering if there's anything on the flip side.
You
So-
can, but it's one-time money, so, I
So,
mean,
and
we
part,
can spend it 100 different times.
and part of it too is we saved some money curriculum-wise by doing Project Lead the Way, but we didn't have an expansive curriculum cost. So this comes into it. Mr. Mays did some budgetary planning curriculum-wise, so we have another off year. Next year, we're able to pay for, achieve with that money. And then, like I said, there's a decrease that final year. We'll just have to, we'll plan for that expense.
You have to pay this year?
Oh, no, in July.
So one other thing is, so with COVID and stuff, would this be something we could implement if we're not fully back to school? I mean, is there a way for students, especially at the younger grade levels, to still learn?
If we were not to be enrolled in school,
Yes, we all want.
Don't even say that.
worst case scenario.
Especially as parents, we would love for our kids to go to school.
I mean, I would say that this would be something that we would delay and not pay for if that was a scenario.
Needs to be in the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they can do stuff online, but the key is the training and the supportive teachers, and we would have to do some work to that.
I'll make a motion we approve Achieve 3,000 reading program for the next 3 years, I guess.
Can we?
Doesn't have to be.
No, I'm not.
What's a contract, though?
Do we have this?
Yeah, we approved the Pepsi contract as a 5-year.
Right.
Well,
Do we
it
have
just
this
has to
on
have the right-
informational? Do we need to have it on
I
informational
don't think
before
we-
we can vote?
I don't think we have to have it on informational. Well, it's on requiring actions.
Right, I
What's
didn't
she
know
saying?
if we had to have had it on
Oh,
informational.
no, it wouldn't be like it wouldn't be a policy.
Okay, so that's just a policy.
Yeah, that's the 30-day magic rule of policies. You just have to have the anytime you're in more than a 1-year contract, you have to have the non-appropriation language. And, you know, in a contract.
That's where I was going with it.
Whether it's financing or a copier or something like this, you gotta have your appropriation.
Second.
Second? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay.
All right.
It's for approval of the paid bills, and I will need a roll call, please.
Only question I have, and it's not a big deal, is do we know what, like with BMU, what we're saving since we've been out of school for 2 months? Or?
That's a great.
We will in
No.
April.
Because the numbers are skewed, because we've already got a big credit from where we were overcharged last July, so they're still making it up, so.
No,
Oh.
I will have, when we get to June 30, we'll see. It won't be as much as you think it might.
Still gotta heat them and cool them, but just not as much.
Yeah.
Not running all the computers, that helps tremendously.
Right. Yeah, I entertain a motion. Oh, get a motion.
Motion to approve paid bills?
Second.
Ms. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Cantrell?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Alcorn?
Yes.
Mr. Tanner?
Yeah. Oh, abstain, sorry.
Abstain.
What about Mr. Blease? Oh, he can't vote, he's not.
Yeah, it's not on, it's a roll call.
Sorry.
You vote.
Sorry.
Chad, but it passes.
All right, go to the consent agenda items. Approval of the following minutes, executive session April 14th, 2020, regular session April 14th, 2020, executive session April 28th, 2020, ratification of support staff report, acceptance of employee retirement Debbie Shaneyfeld, acceptance of employee resignation Taylor Duvall, approval of the following board policies: BA, board operational goals, rescind, BBE, school board vacancies, BHA, board training and development, FED, selection of construction manager at risk, FEF, construction contracts, bidding and awards, IC, academic calendar. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We should let Kyle, since this is his last.
You never know.
Is it?
Wait,
No,
but
we never-
we're coming back for June as we transition, because we got plans.
Uh-oh.
That's what's
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Yeah, that is his, that's motion to adjourn.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Robinson, can I get your ear real quick before I leave? I know y'all are fixing something else, but I'm actually.
I need to go, yeah.
Oh, are we?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not
Yeah, go ahead.
Steve, is your refrigerator running?